Hello and welcome to our midweek video. It's been a few weeks since we've done this because I was out of town and then we had a business meeting. So we will be in 1 Corinthians chapter 11 in just a couple of minutes. There are two pertinent announcements I wanted to give you. The first one is that fellowship dinner is this Sunday after the morning worship service. So please plan on that. The theme is tailgating. So bring things that would be related to that because it's Super Bowl Sunday. And then secondly, I announced Sunday kind of what our schedule was going to look like for our Sunday night video series, Getting to the Heart of Parenting, and we have changed it. So the elders talked last night, and just for continuity's sake, we are going to be doing this every week on Sunday nights rather than taking any breaks like our normal Sunday night schedule is. So this Sunday night, it will be at 7 o'clock because of the Super Bowl party, but then after that, for the 8 weeks following that, it will be at 6 p.m. And also, if you wanted to come and were unable to be there for this last Sunday night's time, I can get you access to the video so that you can catch up and then be here this Sunday. All right, those are the two announcements. So let me switch my screen now and we will look at 1 Corinthians chapter 11. Our title for this study is How Head Coverings Point to Authority and Honor is based in God's design and creation. We're in 1 Corinthians 11, 7 through 16. You can see where it is in your outline. We began in this part in verses 2 through 6 a few weeks ago, proper adornment. Men not wearing head coverings. Women are to wear head coverings to show the recognition of authority when prophesying or praying. So it seems like it's in a church setting when the body is gathered. That was a cultural thing as far as head coverings, but it pointed to how one viewed authority. So that was proper adornment. The theological foundations and an argument from nature are what we will look at tonight. So let me go ahead and give you this introduction. In 11:2 through 14:40, Paul addresses improper practice in women's adornment, the Lord's Supper, and spiritual gifts. So all the way to 14:40. This first section dealing with women wearing head coverings, and I would add men not wearing head coverings, is notably difficult to understand. We will follow the outline that I just showed you on the page before, trying to figure out what Paul is teaching, the deeper implications, and what it means for our lives. Verses 2 through 6 is teaching about men praying or prophesying with their heads covered, or women doing it with their heads uncovered, relates to the culture of the time. Roman men sometimes pulled their togas over their heads when they were worshiping pagan gods. So for a Christian to mimic this cultural practice was dishonoring to the man's head, Jesus. For women, a head covering was a sign of marriage. So for a wife to do this was dishonoring to her head, her husband, and then therefore obviously Jesus too. The ESV Study Bible says, in cultures where women's head coverings are not a sign of being married, wives do not need to cover their heads in worship, but they could obey this command by wearing some other physical symbol of being married. This is all about all of us here in the church setting, glorifying God by recognizing the authority he has placed in our lives, honoring our head. Next, Paul will provide the theological basis for his teaching, going back to God's design and creation and nature. This relates to our view of the importance of authority and honor and why we were created, and the interdependence between the genders that God has designed to emphasize their equal value. Let's look at the verses, then we'll look at one question that's a summary, and then it won't be as many questions for this study. It's because of the nature of it, it'll be more just some explanation. Now I commend you because you remember me in everything and maintain the traditions even as I delivered them to you. But I want you to understand that the head of every man is Christ. The head of a wife is her husband, and the head of Christ is God. Every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors his head. But every wife who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head, since it is the same as if her head were shaven. For if a wife will not cover her head, then she should cut her hair short. But since it is disgraceful for a wife to cut off her hair or shave her head, let her cover her head. So I would again point you back to our study on January 8th when we were in this passage specifically. Now verses 7 through 16. For a man ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God. But woman is the glory of man. For man was not made from woman, but woman from man. Neither was man created for woman, but woman for man. That is why a wife ought to have a symbol of authority on her head, because of the angels. Nevertheless, in the Lord, woman is not independent of man, nor man of woman. For as woman was made from man, so man is now born of woman. And all things are from God. Judge for yourselves. Is it proper for a wife to pray to God with her head uncovered? Does not nature itself teach you that if a man wears long hair, it is a disgrace for him? But if a woman has long hair, it is her glory, for her hair is given to her for a covering. If anyone is inclined to be contentious, we have no such practice, nor do the churches of God. Excuse me. All right. This first question, do you have any initial observations or questions as you look at the passage as a whole and the individual elements? I would guess that would be true because this is a notably difficult passage. Second, how would you briefly describe the passage, specifically, as I mentioned, verses 7 through 16? The instructions for cultural markers that are about recognizing authority when praying or prophesying is based, okay, so those cultural markers that were true in Paul's day, not true in ours, but they showed something that was underlying our view of authority, is based in God's design in creation and nature. Thinking about this properly emphasizes how we value the authority, honor. I'm going to start that over. I can't get my words right. Thinking about this properly emphasizes how we value the authority, honor, and interdependence God has designed so that it brings glory to Him and brings us fulfillment. Okay, as I mentioned, in each of these sections of verses, there won't be questions. It will be more of a summary of each section. So first, verses 7 through 12, the theological foundations for proper adornment and its relation to recognition of authority is given in these verses. Verses 7 through 10 connect head coverings and spouses to creation. Men are the image and glory of God. Who they are honors Him, but women are the glory of man. Both are the image of God. Notice Paul doesn't say that. Let me just read the verse. So let's look at verse 7 or verse 8. I'm sorry, verse 7. Man ought to cover his head since he is the image and glory of God, but woman is the glory of man. It doesn't say anything about woman being the image, so that we can affirm that women are the image of God too. Okay, both are the image of God, but man was created first, and woman was created from man and for him. That's what Paul's saying. It is not that husbands are not to honor their wives. That is true, but it's not what he's talking about here. But God's design in creation specifies how the wife honors her husband. So the cultural signs of acknowledging authority here, woman with her head covered, man without her head covered, are about embracing who we are in God's design. And that then transcends culture. Okay, so it doesn't matter whether a woman has her head covered or uncovered now, or the same for a man. It is about how a man is the image and glory of God. And so, therefore, husbands here are to point to the Lord and honor Him with who they are as men. And then the same for women, who they are as women outside, yes, but especially inside, are to honor their husband and honor the Lord. So the cultural signs of acknowledging authority are about embracing who we are in God's design as men, as women, outside of marriage, just in the roles we have and how we echo who God has created us to be, but then inside marriage and the roles we have in marriage, so as to bring honor to Him. Related to the heart, this is about how embracing our roles in marriage, and then I would even say as men and women, glorifies the Lord's wisdom in the way He's originally designed us, and it also brings us joy. Okay, and then secondly, in these verses, Paul's reference to the angels in verse 10. So let me just read verse 10. That is why a wife ought to have a symbol of authority on her head. Then he just simply says, because of the angels. So that's hard to understand, but may refer to the fact that there is more going on in Christian worship than we understand, so we should take it seriously. The presence of angels, so thinking correctly is important. Here again, Paul's talking about cultural realities, but that the idea underneath it transcends it as far as the way we are thinking about authority and honoring the Lord. or it could mean that angels are concerned with the order and design God has established to honor him, and we should be too. And then third, here in verses 11 through 12, Paul's message in these two verses makes it clear that he is in no way saying that women are less than men. Verse 11, nevertheless, in the Lord, a woman is not independent of man, nor man of woman. There is an interdependence that we have. For as woman was made from man, so man is now born of woman. We know that. That seems clear biologically. And all things are from God. Okay, so women are not less than men, for there is an interdependence in the Lord. They both need each other. And biologically, men are obviously dependent on women to be born. All of this is from the Lord. It is the right design for his honor and his people's good, both in male roles, but then specifically here, as is being demonstrated in the adornment things he's talking about in marriage roles, and how that makes us think about our view of authority, our view of honor, our view of our roles as husbands and wives, and the interdependence there. All right, and then letter B, verses 13 through 16 appeal to the natural order to continue to emphasize how head coverings in that time pointed to how males and females reflected God's design and were called to think and act in a way that brought honor to that design and therefore to him. Verse 13, he appeals to their own judgment and being able to discern the truth of what he's saying. He says in 13, judge for yourselves. And then he talks about the properness again in that culture of a wife praying to God with her head uncovered. And then in verses 14 and 15, let me just read those. Does not nature itself teach you that if a man wears long hair, it's a disgrace for him? But if a woman has long hair, it's her glory, for her hair is given to her for a covering. If anyone is inclined to be contentious, we have no such practice, nor do the churches of God. In these verses, nature functions as an instructor that teaches human beings about distinctions between men and women, and those distinctions are echoed in culture. This supports Paul's teaching about how head coverings reveal attitudes and how people view God's design, authority, and honor. Related to if this is teaching against men ever having long hair or women ever having short hair, this quote is helpful. Natural, intrinsic maleness inclines a man to feel repulsed and shameful for wearing culturally defined symbols of womanhood, presenting yourself like a woman. The God-designed healthy male soul revolts against clothing, or then I would say any presentation himself in symbols of femininity, just like the God-designed healthy female soul revolts against presenting herself as a man. That revolt from nature is a God-given teacher. So it would be the idea that it's intrinsic in maleness or femaleness that it should be revolting to present yourself as the other gender. And so then I believe if we look at it that way, Paul is not teaching that a man can't have longer hair or a woman have shorter hair. He's getting down to the heart of things, that's saying there's something inside us that makes it revolting to present ourselves as the other gender. And so again, that could fit into where we are in culture, whether culture does not view it wrongly or rightly for a man to have long hair or for a woman to have short hair. So that's how I view that. I think that quote is helpful. But let's look at this last thing. In verse 16, Paul refers to those probably in the Corinthian church who would tend to be contentious about this. Maybe some of the married women weren't covering their heads when they were praying or prophesying, and maybe some of the men were. Okay, so they were purposefully being contentious. Paul's saying, we're not going to have that. Other churches practice what Paul is teaching here. But I think that gets to something else about just people having a heart for being contentious all the time. And there's a danger in that. All right, what are some implications for us from this text? Long paragraph here, even though our culture is different now than in the first century, when certain things meant certain things, head coverings or not, the underlying heart issues apply to us. The design of men and women, particularly here related to roles and design in marriage, is something that is a gift of God and allows us to glorify Him and find joy when we submit to all of its aspects. So let men and husbands be who God designed them to be, and making them in His image and making them be His glory. Let women and wives do the same thing in relation to who God designed them to be as they honor their husbands in the Lord. Let us all be mindful of an embracing of the good design of authority that God has given us in all aspects of it. And I didn't mention here, but let us glory in the interdependence that God has given us as that's a good design by God. And all of this is to be for his glory. So let us fill the roles of men, fill the roles of husband. Let us fulfill the roles of women. Let us fulfill the roles of wives. And then how does this point us to Jesus? Jesus is the example and enablement for us in being willing to be submissive to authority for his Father's glory. And so that relates to men and women as is exemplified here in the head coverings issue. And then secondly, the grace he provides is sufficient for everything as we think about how we are and present ourselves and think as men and husbands, and the same thing for women and wives, including how to approach this rightly. And when we fail, his grace is sufficient and overcomes our deficiencies so often, and we're grateful for that. All right. Thank you, everyone. I'm not going to pray for this study because it's gone a little longer, so I will go ahead and say goodbye now from this screen. But I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I hope this was a blessing to you. Goodbye.